optometry is our passion. This is what we do. But you have to have other things of out of clinic. If all you're doing is clinic, that you will burn out. You have to have other passions outside of the clinic, and now you have extra days to do it. So use that time and be it for you.
Hey there, it's Dr. Ryan Corte, and I'm looking for North Carolina licensed optometrists or those interested in becoming licensed in the state of North Carolina to join my team. If that's you or somebody you know, reach out to me on social media or email me at ryan.court1@gmail.com. Now, enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ryan Reflects. Today, I have a good friend and colleague on who actually we just connected not too long ago at a Connect to Grow event in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Benjamin Lickteig, who is residing out of the northeastern part of the country. He lives over in Massachusetts. And Ben, welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ryan. It's an honor to be here.
So, for those that don't know you, I know you well, but for those that don't know you, I'd love for you to just share with us a little bit about yourself and kind of your journey into optometry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up in north central Iowa, little farm community, about 6,000 people. Being in such a small town in Iowa, you really kind of only have the essentials as far as your healthcare goes.
Hmm.
Optometry certainly was there. Growing up, I wanted to get into the healthcare field in some capacity, but my view of what was out there was actually somewhat limited. But you always went to your annual eye exam. You went to your dentist appointment, your pediatrician appointment. So that's kind of really what I focused in on. What I loved about optometry was that you could have your own business and do it. I didn't really want to work in a hospital. Really wanted to be able to connect to the community directly. And so, when I was a kid, I was pretty much saying, well, is that optometry or is that dentistry? And I just thought
Yeah.
optometry was the better field. And I think I chose wisely because I love the profession. I went to optometry school at the Illinois College of Optometry in Chicago. Had a great experience there. Went on rotations throughout the country. I kind of thought it was an opportunity to sort of broaden my horizons a little bit, and did a rotation at the West Haven VA in Connecticut. And it was there that I met my wife, who's from the East Coast, and that's what brought me to the East Coast. So if you would have thought that I would have been living in the Boston suburbs, 20 years ago, I would have said, you're absolutely not, you're crazy. But it's funny how life takes you places.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, a lot of people that I know from Iowa like go back to Iowa and they're strong and they have the roots of being in the Midwest. And I did my residency on the South Side of Chicago at ICO at the Illinois Eye Institute. I did the primary care and ocular disease residency. I love that facility. I love that program. Tell me a little bit about your experience there and just kind of what life looked like for those 4 years.
I loved ICO. It's something that when I have young individuals talking to me about optometry school and whether they should pursue it or what school they should go to, I speak very highly of ICO. I think part of its negative is its location in Chicago, but I also look at that's a huge positive because the experience that you get in the South Side of Chicago is real world, and you're so prepared clinically when you get out of those 4 years. I mean, you're managing glaucoma your second year of optometry school.
Oh yeah.
That was pretty jarring, to be able to do that in your second year of optometry school, relocate to Massachusetts, which at that time didn't have anti-glaucoma prescribing rights. You're like, what? This is so routine. So I speak very highly of ICO in the clinic there in the Illinois Eye Institute. I feel like they do a great job at preparing their students. I pay attention to the National Board pass rates. ICO does extremely well with that. So it was I chose wisely, I would say.
No, I completely agree. It's interesting you say that you were not only managing glaucoma at the Illinois Institute, you're managing glaucoma that you have to run a 10-2 on to even get some kind of visual field. uh, because there's so much visual field loss. We're talking extremely advanced glaucoma in some of the clinics there, and yeah, that's what I noticed right away. I mean, we had a not only primary care, but we had an emergency triage clinic, and everything walked in the door. It was
Yeah.
absolutely nuts. So I hear you. How did that feel then to have to move over to a state? You know, obviously you met your wife, you fell in love, and you landed in a state that had limitations for your scope of practice. Like how did that feel, and how have you kind of navigated that?
Yeah. So, back then, I mean, it has improved since then with the passage a few years ago of the um, glaucoma bill here in Massachusetts. So we do have glaucoma prescribing rights now. Our practice is managing our glaucoma patients. So it's been liberating to be able to get to that point. Um, but back then, Massachusetts really did sort of have a dark stain on it within eye care because it was at that point the only state that could not prescribe anti-glaucoma medications. And so really it was kind of one of those states where like, oh, don't practice in Massachusetts. At that time, you know, this was back in 2009 to 2010. We're in the middle of the Great Recession. So at
Oh
that point,
yeah.
you're just happy to have a job.
Yeah.
And don't really get to, beggars can't be choosers. But what I kind of found out is that Massachusetts is a great place to practice optometry. And I didn't realize this at the time. Um, but when I relocated to Massachusetts, I really wanted to still go my own path. I grew up thinking that I wanted to be a business owner, and I aspired for private practice. However, um, 2010 was not really a great time to open up a private practice, especially when you're completely new to an area and you have no network, you have no
Yeah.
resources. So you look for associate positions, but that's when I really started to explore the possibility of a sublease. And so I started to explore that, and lenscrafters had an opportunity, and so I started to look into that. And this is where I'm going with where I think it's great to practice in Massachusetts because this sublease model exists, and this was something that I didn't even really know about, and I still think is an opportunity for academia to shed some light on optometry students about how sublease opportunities work. It's not available like that in all the states. Illinois, for example, there are sublease locations, but in the way that the statutes are written in Illinois, corporations can hire optometrists directly. That can't happen in Massachusetts and all of New England. And so, these sublease models exist, and that's kind of really what led me to my first lenscrafter sublease. And essentially, you run a private practice within their four walls, and it's been great.
Oh, we're gonna dive into that for sure because yeah, both you and I have that in common. We practice it within and adjacent to lens crafters and that corporate partnership. What I think is really unique about what you shared, though, and I think it's a common thing that I hear. I had no clue what a sublease was. I knew private, I knew corporate, I knew working alongside ophthalmology, maybe in a VA medical center, healthcare clinic. That truly is state dependent, though, on some of the actual laws that are drawn up. You know, in the state of North Carolina, we have the same kind of thing. You can't work directly for a corporation. I had no idea, and I don't think that that is covered enough in schools. I do believe that there needs to be more education on breaking down what is corporate optometry based on your affiliation. Are you directly employed? Because guess what? You can be directly employed by a corporation. You can be directly employed by a private practice. You can be directly employed by a lot of different entities. But what kind of opportunities are there within that realm of partnering with corporate? That being said, though, what did your first job look like? So you didn't just jump right into a sublease. You had to have had a first job and kind of dip your toes in. What did that look like?
I did. I worked for an associate for an OD. This was actually in Connecticut. So I did before I got to Massachusetts. I did, as I mentioned before, I met my wife in Connecticut. She was finishing up grad school there. So when I graduated from ICO and relocated to the East Coast, I actually spent 1 year in Connecticut. Um, I kind of took a job that I knew that it would be sort of an easy out in case it didn't work with the relationship.
Sure.
It did work with the relationship. Happily married for 15 years. We have three beautiful girls. But the first opportunity that I took was an associate for an individual who did do subleases in Connecticut, and he was a great guy. I appreciated the opportunity he gave me and respected him greatly. Um, the location that I was at, I pretty much took it under my own control and was able to, kind of run things and schedule things the way that I want to. The optical staff, I was kind of helping guide along, helping them. So it was a great year where I was able to reflect on it and say, well, I can do this. I'm kind of doing it now. If I, take the plunge, I think that I'd be able to figure it out along the way. And so, of course, when my wife finished grad school, we kind of had a moment where we had to evaluate where we wanted to go. And did we want to stay on the East Coast? Did we want to move back to the Midwest? And her family was from the Boston area, so it did make sense for us to relocate there. And that's what led me to explore the subleases at Lenscrafters, which landed my first location.
See, that is such a huge point too, though, Ben, because a lot of times I'm talking to optometry students or even new graduates, and they don't know where they want to be. If you don't know where you want to land, you guys were at a fork in the road. Do we go to the Midwest? Do we go back to where you're from? And you made that decision, and that's a huge decision. Just understanding where you want to be and where you want to practice, and then figuring out how are you going to practice and what modality and what specialization. So you guys made that leap of faith. You were already up you know, in that region, so it's not too far from Connecticut, getting back to Boston, and you found your first opportunity. So what did that look like? Did you come into an existing space that maybe was opening up? Was it a cold start where it was a brand new build out? Like what did that whole, because I think a lot of people don't even know what the process looks like to get into that kind of relationship. It's a big commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you don't realize the opportunity, how great the opportunity is until after the fact. And I'll say that there is luck along the way.
Oh yeah.
And this opportunity was an existing location. There had been an established doctor there for a number of years. She had left, went to private practice. There was another doctor who was there after her. He wasn't there that long, decided it wasn't for him. So there had been some transition at this
Hmm.
location, but this location was established. And, when there was, when I looked at it, when I went and who I was dealing with was a regional manager at the time, who I got connected when I, went to Luxottica ods.com or whatever, I remember exactly what the website was that, you put in an inquiry that you're interested to see what's available. And she's who connected me. So I met her at the location. I toured the location and literally I was thinking in my mind, I was like, this is a private practice, huge, beautiful front desk, two exam lanes, a pre-test room, another room for future diagnostic equipment. Uh, and I kind of fell in love with the location. Like this is fantastic. And for the fact that it had been established and there had been transition with the ODs, I was shocked to see that on the first day that I actually saw patients there. I was literally thinking I was just going to sit there and see, twiddle my thumbs. And we saw like 10 patients the first day. And I was like, well, like, okay. I'm going to have to catch up real quick here because I don't know anything as far as business management. So yeah, so the opportunity was great and lucky that that I had it.
Oh, that's incredible. You and it's funny now because you understand this so much more, but a lot of these corporate entities, particularly lens crafters, they have a global brand, and that global brand drives people in. Whether it's Lickteig Family Eye Care, um, whether it's another provider, I always see it as the greatest marketing tool that we could possibly be affiliated with. And then it's our job as the independent doctor of optometry adjacent to build that relationship and to educate the patient on their eye health and vision care needs and retain that patient and building that trust, right? And then obviously
Well,
transitioning them over to lens crafters to go ahead and explore optical needs and really building up the books that way. But the power of the marketing tools that LensCrafters and EssilorLuxottica have to bring and drive patients in day one for you is pretty incredible. What does that look like for your practice as you've now gone from one to a multi-location practice?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Ryan. It's marketing, and that's something that we optometrists, we didn't go to school to be marketers.
No.
Like marketing's the last thing you're thinking about when you're 27 years old and just, starting to pay back your student loans. You just want patients that you can, pay your bills. So not having to worry about that was instrumental in where I'm at right now. So, but in the back of my mind, there was always that thought of oh, private practice, private practice. That's really how I grew up thinking.
Hmm.
Um, and so there was a period early in my career where I would explore other opportunities. Go to, look at a couple different private practices for doctors who are looking to sell. And there was one particular lunch that I had with a doctor who he really kind of opened up to me, and he shared me his books. Um, and I looked at it and I said, why am I putting myself into debt for this? I said, I already have this, and for no startup. And so that really completely changed the trajectory for me to where I said, okay, like, private practice is great, and I respect it, and I'm glad that our profession has that particular model in such a high capacity because other subspecialties don't. However, I also looked at the sublease model being that much better. So I really kind of changed my thought process a little bit. I said, okay, well, if I want to continue to grow my business and I wanted to scale this business, the opportunity that I have is to double down on the sublease model. And there had been a second location that had came available that was not too far from the first location. I knew the doctor who was there, so we started to communicate, and this was about 2015. Actually, yeah, we're going to hit our 10-year anniversary at the second location here later this year. And when I signed that second lease, that was really when I was like, okay, this is the direction that this practice is going to go.
Sure. So then you weren't seeking it out. It was the opportunity was kind of maybe some cross collaboration or a little bit of networking, and you found out that it was available. Like, what did? Because I think a lot of people are like, when and why do I scale? Like, how do I do that? When do I know it's the right time? And sometimes, like as you referenced, well, the opportunity will come to you.
Yeah, contact lens reps know a lot. I remember my Bausch and Lomb rep was the one who kind of dropped me that little nugget. And I had known this doctor from, lens crafters dinners that were, had been had over the years.
Hmm.
And so I, had her contact information. And so I just reached out to her. I said, hey, I heard this. Just wanted to, see if that was something that was true. And if so, I might be possibly interested. And it was true, and so that's how that sort of came about. Um, so yeah, so in that particular situation, contact lens, there was a contact lens rep that had made me aware of that. So they have a lot of information. Since then, back then I didn't really have a lot of lens crafters, um, middle management or senior leadership connections. I really kind of felt sort of isolated a little bit, and um, that was something that I had to kind of overcome in a different way, different story. But um, since then, I've formed these relationships with senior eye care directors, regional managers, VPs of zone VPs and VPs of eye care. And so now, it's just really communicating with them when you're having your business conversations about, what direction you want to go. Are you ready to scale? And then at that point, though, some of these opportunities just they come to you for them, and so much so that you got to turn some of them away because you're not ready for it, or you have to kind of take care of the opportunities that you're already, the existing businesses that you're already operating. But now, once these relationships are formed, people come to you with the opportunities.
Well, yeah, and you've done an incredible job building out your network and your reputation within EssilorLuxottica and LensCrafters, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in the conversation. But I'm really curious. So, single sublease holder, you had your first location, you scaled into the second. What challenges did that drive your way? Like going from one to two is hard, right? I mean, it is.
Very hard.
It's a like. What did that look like?
Yeah, that it's funny. You always ask young parents, like, what's the biggest adjustment when you're having kids? Is it going from no kids to one kid, or one kid to two kid, or two kid to three kid? When I'm asked that question, I say going from zero to one, because it's complete shock to your system. Like
Hmm.
you weren't a parent, now you're a parent, and your life is forever changed. When it came to business, and in my business, it was going from one sublease to two. With the one sublease, I was there all the time. So I was the jack of all trades. Like, I provided patient care 6 days a week. I would, hire a doctor one day a week, like on Sunday, to, give me one day off. I didn't have, I didn't have kids. We didn't have much. So I just worked, tirelessly for a few years just to kind of build things up.
Sure.
Um, and that's just what I did. And so when the second location came available, I didn't change. I still did what I was just normally doing at the first location. Meanwhile, chaos was happening at the second location. And so I was like, how the heck am I going to do both?
Hmm.
And so that was a huge adjustment for me. And it took some time. I really went through some hard knocks. We just had our first kid too, so there was obviously the home life differences there too.
Yeah.
And it really started to, for me to realize that you can't do this by yourself, that you need people around you, and you need good people around you. That is good staff and good associate doctors. And so, it took some time for me to get to that point, but then I really started to build, sort of that inner circle of individuals who were going to, knew the direction I was going to go, and, shared the same values and mission that I had for the practice. And as soon as I realized that, everything clicked and kind of fell into place. But that was a very hard adjustment.
Yeah,
One
and
that I
you try.
wouldn't, the one that I wouldn't ever trade in again. I think, now what I like to do is try to let young doctors or new doctors to this game know that. Just say, hey, I didn't have a playbook on this. I jumped in with both feet, and my feet got burnt for a little bit, and I don't want that to happen to other doctors. And just say there's, you know, you know, and this is where I think that mentorship is so huge, with any profession. But in those early years, I didn't have that, and that probably stunted my growth a little bit at the beginning. Um, but now, with the world being such a smaller place, with podcasts and all these forums for doctors to connect very easily, I hope that doctors who were in my shoes at that point don't have to go through that same struggle that I went through.
Well, and there's a lot of resources out there for optometry in today's 2025 world. But as you reference, it's there wasn't all of the playbooks out there. There wasn't all the tools in your toolbox. And eventually you found AllDocs, right? So what did that look like? Because AllDocs being the association of, lens crafters, sublease holders, doctors, and that's a huge resource for me personally. Like, what did that look like? When did you find that group, and how has that helped you grow?
So I always got the quarterly newsletter, and so I was aware of all docs in those early years, but um, didn't really dive into it that much. Would still go to the major national conferences with my optometry friends, and that's kind of how I had my outlets outside of work. But um, I had a call with someone from the eye care team at the time, from uh, Luxottica, and I remember this conversation vividly. And I said, I feel like I'm on an island. I'm like, I have my
Mm,
island, and I am so disconnected And I know that there's other doctors who do the same thing, but like I have no connection to any of them. And the ones that are directly close to me are my competition. So I just feel alone. And that was the beginning of the start of the LensCrafters event Connect to Grow. And I got invited to be a part of that group to kind of build this from the ground up.
Oh,
And
cool.
so, this is like 2016 or 2017 maybe. Um, and we went down to Clearwater, Florida, and there's a bunch of doctors down there. And when I got there and it's the reception, everyone's kind of meeting. And I noticed that everybody knew each other.
You're like, how? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, aren't we all the same thing? Aren't we all on our own little islands and nobody knows
Yeah.
each other? They all knew each other and they're telling these stories from years ago. And I'm like, hi, I'm new here. Um, and at that meeting, multiple doctors said, why don't you go to AllDocs? And I said, I never thought about it, I guess. And they're like, well, that's how we all know each other. Because the connect to grow thing is great. And it's something that, LensCrafters was building for their LensCrafters affiliated doctors. But this AllDocs group was already in existence.
Hmm.
And they're like, you got to come to AllDocs, got to come to AllDocs, got to come to AllDocs. And I said, okay, I'm going to do, I'm going to go, I'm going to go, I'm going to go. It took me a couple of years to get there because of, raising a young family. But the first one that I went to, and I think this was your first one, I think this is where you and I met, was
Yeah.
in 2019 in Bermuda,
Yeah.
um, at the AllDocs there. And then I got there and my mind just exploded. And I was like, where have I been?
Yeah.
Um, like I've been going to these national meetings and, but I'm like, no, I'm not making any sort of connections there. It's just there to kind of get your necessary CE. And I'm like, I'm learning more at this event just from sitting down and having a conversation with them, like in between the CE events, sitting down for lunch and talking, because everybody was, your struggles are everyone else's struggles. Um, very similar business models, just, and there was no worry about competition because these individuals were all from different parts of the country. So it was like open source. You could just share, and you wanted everybody's success, and they wanted my success. So that completely changed the trajectory of my personal growth, and certainly the growth of Lickteig Family Eye Care.
Yes, I remember that meeting almost being canceled because of a hurricane, right? And they're like,
Yeah,
"Stay tuned.
yeah,
We're gonna see if this thing's gonna happen." And like, I remember leading up to the meeting, I'm like, "What am I doing? I don't know the group very well. My wife is pregnant. She was coming. She spent a lot of time just not feeling great, right? Because it was first trimester, but we already committed to it. We show up, and of course, the hurricane doesn't hit Bermuda, but that was that was a wild
it
experience, and I can
was.
tell you as well that experience, let alone just some of the individuals within the group, very warm, very welcoming, some excellent mentors. If you don't have a mentor in whatever, silo that you're in and within optometry, and we're such a small profession, but there's so many different verticals within. But if you don't have a mentor, you got to seek one out. You got to seek guidance and help and assistance. There's so many incredible groups. And so AllDocs has been great for me and you. And then from those experiences, being able to go to meetings annually and just learn best practices, share information, whether it's on a forum or on individual text threads, I really truly appreciate it. But you're not only involved in AllDocs, you've also now gotten involved in what's called the OAC. What is that, and how has your experience in that kind of shaped your professional career?
Yeah, I probably certainly would not be on the OAC if I did not um, really start getting involved with All Docs and the Connect to Grow program. I think the Connect to Grow program was something where I really started to get to work with some of the senior leadership of LensCrafters and the eye care team and start to develop those relationships. So I don't remember what year it was. This maybe 2020. It was like right before COVID, where I got a call from um, Mark Jaco, who's retired now, but I'd worked with him, when he would do site visits at the location leading up to that, And he actually is instrumental for my growth as well. I got to give him a shout out. He When I was struggling with the two locations, he gave me a book, and I still have the book. It's probably behind me somewhere. Um, and it was really, changing the mindset and influencing people and getting the people, to help grow the business. Um, and that helped a lot. And I really respected him for that. And um, that relationship was always there. And so when I started to take different locations, and at that time I had two full sublease locations. I had a modified sublease, and at the time I actually even had a lenscrafters at Macy's. Um, and so I kind of had all these models,
Sure.
and I think they wanted really good representation on the OAC that could speak to each one of these models. And I think that was one thing that sort of set me apart from other individuals, is that I had my hands in all these different models. Um, and then obviously with the relationships, there was a kind of a, from their perspective, probably to, Ben's, young, he's got multiple locations. They're all different types of models. We can check off a lot of boxes with him being at being part of this optometry advisory council, because he can speak to some of these models that some of the other doctors might not be able to speak to because they don't have those particular models. So I think at the time, having those different types of models led to me to get on that optometry advisory council.
And how do you feel like that's, helped you grow? Because that's a pretty good, it's a huge voice up to leadership, and so I appreciate all that you guys do, but what has that experience been like?
Well, it was trial by fire right away, because I joined. I was at one meeting. It was in Cincinnati. I got to meet everybody. There was a couple of other new members too, so I wasn't alone there.
Mhm.
But there's certainly some veterans in the group. Um, but then right after that, COVID hit,
Oh,
and like, the world was kind of chaos in, that February, March, April 2020 period. So I go from being, the new OAC member, to us literally having calls sometimes multiple times a week to try to navigate this event. And of course, this is where senior leadership, nobody had faced these things before.
no.
And so to kind of be part of that think tank, was great experience, because, you were able to bring fresh ideas to it from, my perspective, but also, um, hear how people who've been in the industry for decades were going to handle it. And, some of them, there were some tough conversations to be had. At the time it was, you know, you know, you know, if our state, and of course, every state's different, but if the state is giving us a mandate that we can't be open, how does that impact our sublease arrangement with lenscrafters? And there were doctors who were scared to death that the state is telling me I have to close, but my work agreement says I have to be open. Like,
Mm.
what are we going to do? We don't want to lose our businesses, but at the same time, like, we the state's telling us to close our doors. So it was fascinating to have to go through those exercises. Um, and so I felt like that really kind of, you know, hardened me, just like it hardened everybody. I think all business owners got hardened during
Oh,
COVID.
man. Yeah.
If you survived it, you came out the other side, and uh, were better for it. Um, so we had frequent calls at the beginning with that, and I think that really solidified a lot of the relationships within the doctors within the OEC, as well as the key individuals LensCrafter senior leadership, that we kind of tackled those problems together. And as a result of that, these conversations that we have with them can be very candid. We can, even though that they might be tough conversations, some big problems to solve, we form these relationships where you can be open with them and understand that we're all in this together. We want what's best for our patients. We want what's best for our practices, and certainly we want what's best for the brand overall. And having those relationships, you can get real. Um, and that's important. That this isn't just something where you know talk at a surface level, that you really can kind of dive in deep and know that you still respect the person on the other side of the table from you, so you can really make a difference.
You joined the OAC, COVID hits. Yeah, you're going to build a relationship with these individuals with those calls that are under pressure pretty quickly. And just like I know, running a business, you have to have tough conversations,
Hmm.
whether
Absolutely.
it's tough conversations with, whatever. If you're in a private practice, you have to have tough conversations. If you're running a sublease practice, you have to have tough conversations. Any business, you're having tough conversations. What have been some of the more challenging conversations that you've had to have as a small optometric business owner? It doesn't have to be just with, Essilor-Luxottica. It could be with anybody. It could be with staff, could be with doctors, could be, with local leadership.
So yeah, I try to be as transparent as possible. So the way that we have 4 locations now, and I have an operations team, who really does do a lot of the day-to-day, um, uh, operations of the business. And then of course you have your associate doctors, who are,
Hmm.
you don't have a practice without your associate doctors. And so I greatly appreciate them tremendously. So I'm aware that I need to have a presence with them. I need to be available for them to help guide them and be their mentor. Um, so I'm usually having conversations with my operations team almost on a daily basis. Whereas my individual doctor, certainly if I'm in the building where they're at, I'm certainly going to have a conversation with them. But we set up a quarterly conversation on the books.
Hmm.
Get out of the office. Let's have a coffee or let's have lunch where we can just sit and talk. And those, generally are very positive conversations. There can be some times where you can have some more difficult conversations, around, hours worked or compensation, things like that. And what I try to do is I try to take emotion out of these hard decisions that need to be made, and I try to be transparent. And I say, okay, like, um, you know, if you want to make X amount of dollars, I want that too. I want you to do that too. Because that means that the business is doing really, really well
Hmm.
for you to do that. However, for us to be able to do that while still maintaining a healthy business, you would have to see 25 patients a day, for an example. And I say, are you ready for that? Are you ready for that? Because the other thing that we also need to be mindful of is work-life balance. And so we have to find that balance where you feel comfortable that you're providing the best care possible for your patients, that you're not approaching things like burnout, but you're still being, you know, properly compensated. So I like to just literally show them math because I always say, numbers don't lie. Numbers tell a
Absolutely.
story. They tell half the story. You got to figure out the other half. But by just being transparent and open and honest with what the numbers show, um, can allow the other side of the table to sort of understand, the thoughts and the process a little bit more. So that's my approach on that.
Yeah, these tough conversations, whether it's with your doctors, your leadership, affiliations, they're challenging. I like that you are very intentional about the process of sitting down with your docs, quarterly coffee, put on the books. That is awesome. And I know that over these conversations, you identified something that a lot of your doctors really like and appreciate. Tell me a little bit about the evolution of the 4-day work week in an optometric practice and how you've kind of championed that. And you have doctors for life from that. I mean, really, you do. You have doctors that are very loyal because of that.
So that was a came of COVID as well. I mean, the thing that I would say that was great about COVID, I mean, there's a lot of horrible things about COVID, but the thing about great about COVID was that you were in this great unknown, and with that great unknown, you took some risks and you did things that normally you probably wouldn't do.
Mhm.
But this one to me kind of just made sense because at the time we had to limit the amount of people in the building. When we did finally get back open, um, we had to limit the amount of people in the building, based on the square footage of the space. And what we quickly realized was our busier locations, which oftentimes operated with double doctor days, could no longer operate with double doctor days.
Mhm.
So essentially, you had to take half of your people, and where are you gonna put them? And of course, at this time, like you know, you you have to protect them. I mean, that's one part of the things of the burden of employers. You have to be there for your employees. And, so we're not laying anybody off. We're going to figure this out. And the thing that did make sense to me during COVID was when a lot of retailers were narrowing their hours down. So rather than opening up at 9, they would okay, we're going to open up 11 and we're going to close at 5. Like, why does that doesn't make any sense? You're taking all of your consumers and now you're packing them in at the time, and we have to limit the amount of people in the building. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm like, well, let's do the opposite of that. And this is something where lenscrafters was completely on board with me with this. I said, these were hours of operations. These are the retail hours of operations. Let's expand the hours. Instead of closing earlier, let's open or let's stay open later. And instead of opening at 10, let's open at 9. So that way we can, spread people out. And then what we immediately did is we just shifted everybody to 4-day work weeks. And so we eliminated the double doctor days. We were still able to handle a larger push, uh, more patients in a day, but we were still able to maintain things like social distancing. And so that's where it all started. And, of course, the doctors have to see more patients in the day. And so, I was having these conversations with my doctors, frequently. I'm like, is this healthy for you? Is this a good model? They said, well, you're definitely tired at the end of the day.
Sure.
But they said, but like I would never go back. That's what they kept saying, never go back. I'm like, okay, like if you guys like it, then this is it. We're gonna do this. We're gonna move forward with this. And after, post pandemic, we stuck with it. And so now, our doctors generally work about, on average about 38 hours per week. It's over 4 days. Some of the days are, 9 to 7, so they're a little bit of a longer day. But they get the benefit of having a whole extra day off in their week. And one of the things I always tell the doctors, I'm like, outside of work, like optometry is our passion. This is what we do. But you have to have other things of out of clinic. If all you're doing
Mhm.
is clinic, that you will burn out. You have to have other passions outside of the clinic, and now you have extra days to do it. So use that time and be it for you. And so we've kind of doubled down on it. That's what we pitch when we are recruiting for new doctors is that model.
I think that's really cool. I know a lot of people in my life, personal relationships with people that have, they're a nurse, they work 312s, or maybe somebody works 410s. And so you took that strategy and you said, we need to space things out based on just the current state of the world. And you found something that works, because who doesn't want to have a 3-day weekend or 3 days off in a row period? Just to work a little bit more on those days that you are in clinic. It makes sense. You're already there, right? You're missing traffic, or you're avoiding just a lot of different challenges throughout the day of leaving at certain times. I want to switch gears though, because something that you did talk about recently that you do in your clinic and that you really also champion is myopia management. And I loved the presentation that you gave at Connect to Grow, because you essentially have doctors, when they join your clinic, they sign on to the thought process right away, and you've built out an incredible operation. So walk me through where and how did you start this program, this myopia management program, and where is it at today?
Sure. So, I mean, 2020 was obviously a pretty big year. I joined the OAC. It was COVID. And that was also when the Cooper Vision MySight lens came out. So when we were open, we had all this extra time, but we really couldn't still do anything with our time. Just because you're so limited on what you can do.
Yeah.
So when that product came out, like, we just naturally said, okay, well, like this is good. We should really learn this product and figure it out. So all the doctors, of course, were on board with that, um, and I, kind of got really passionate about it. I was like, this is really interesting. It's a soft contact lens. It's easy to fit, and it does so much. Um, we struggled with it initially though because there were some complications to how to present it or how to talk to patients about it, this or that. And, and Cooper Vision was talking to me about this as well. And they said, why don't you come down to an event that we're having and let's brainstorm this. And really, from that meeting, it was like, let's just simplify this. Let's simplify let's not convolute it. Let's make it simple for parents to understand and for doctors to be able to fit the contact lens. And so at that meeting, I kind of came back to the doctors and I said, listen, like, I think what our goal needs to be is let's just get this on our patients' eyes.
Mhm.
Let's just do that. Um, and once we started to do that and simplify the process behind it, um, a couple of years pass and we start to see the anecdotal evidence internally. I mean, of course, one thing you read a study and say, "Oh, this is interesting. It works."
Yeah.
But when you see it live in your clinic, that's when you're like, "We gotta double down on this." Um, and that's when we really started to kind of expand just myopia in general, right? Because it's not just my site; it's lifestyle adjustments, it's
Of
it's
course.
atropine, it's ortho K. So there are other treatment options that are available, but it all kind of started with just sort of simplifying this one particular product and just motivated to get it onto children's eyes that was going to make a difference with. And it's kind of grown from there. And so now, when doctors do join the practice, we're having conversations about this product right away. We're having them getting certified on it right away. And really we take a pledge to say myopia management is the standard of care at Lickteig Family Eye Care. So this is what we have to do. And really what it is just a change of mindset when you look at myopia, going from treating it as a reactive condition and being more proactive in its management and proactive in trying to slow its progression down. And really the key thing with that is following up with the patients.
Yeah.
Like you have to, and this is you hit the nail on the head earlier, Ryan, when you were saying about, when somebody first comes to lenscrafters, they bring you the patient, we have to do our job to retain the patient. With myopia, it's easy. It's we need to see these children every single year. We know that the risks of myopia are when children are younger. We have to hit that message home to the parents, the guardians, to say we do want to see you back every single year, even if there is no refractive error right now, because there could be. And we can intervene and put your child on the best path possible if we intervene early. But we can't intervene early if we don't see you for your annual eye exam. So it kind of snowballed from there.
It sounds like in a lot of things that you've done, you kind of dive in head first and build out things as you have the opportunity to learn and grow and research. And I really appreciate that about you. I know a lot of practices want to get more involved in myopia management. I know a lot of practices want to be more unique and innovative in how they provide their doctors, hours of operation and different types of contracts and benefits. And what you've done is you've tested things out and then you continue to kind of double down on what works, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I,
That's
I, I do
incredible.
think that some of my team members get frustrated with me with it a little bit with that because I'm like, yeah, like let's try it,
Yeah.
and some people do like routine and
Hmm.
know what to expect, and so sometimes when I come in and kind of you know you know break things up, I think that sometimes I might cause a little some people to get a little bit frustrated with me. I kind of start to manage their expectations with the now because I'm like, okay, guys, I'm going to AllDocs. So when I get back, be prepared.
Yeah. Lots of
But
ideas.
I've started to have to, offer some restraint on myself as well to say, okay, I can't go in there and change 10 different things at a
Yeah.
time. Let's have a little bit more of a nuanced approach on this a little bit. But yeah, that is what I generally how I operate. I say, you know, I can sit here and study and study and study and prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare. But if I don't take action, nothing is ever going to happen. And so I kind of take that other approach where I'm like, I'm going to take action first. And then I'm going to figure out my mistakes after I am proactive with that
Hmm.
action. And then we'll fix it along the way. And if it doesn't work, we'll get rid of it. Um, but we have to be nimble. We have to be, I always say that, change is the constant in life. And that's kind of the approach that I take. And like I said, some doctors and staff members might get a little bit frustrated with me with that, but I think that they understand my meaning behind it.
Well, you have good intentions, and anytime I mean, any startup, if you read up on startups, build out the startup, measure measure what you're actually doing, and then learn, and then keep redoing that cycle. So a lot of times you're building out protocols or you're beta testing certain things in your practice. Some of those things become a huge part of your clinic, like myopia management, like this 4-day work week. Other things that you've tested out, well, you tried, you've learned from it, and you move on, and you continue to improve not only your practice, but the patient care that you provide, the doctor patient relationship, that overall experience being a part of your practice. So, Ben, to put a kind of a bow on this, we've been talking for a bit. Any final thoughts that you want to share with people that are listening, no matter where they are in their optometric journey? Anything that you kind of just want to share, to the group?
Well, I'm sure that's going to be a lot of optometrists listening to this, and the reassurance is that this is a great profession. Eye care is not going away. If anything, we optometrists are going to be more and more important to the overall healthcare field for decades to come, whether that's
Hmm.
an aging population, whether that is myopia becoming its own epidemic, diabetes on the rise. And amongst all of this is that there's not more ophthalmologists in this country. So who needs to be available for these patients? Doesn't matter which age group, and it's we, the optometrists. So, there's a lot of people who get a little bit worried about the state of the profession and this or that. And of course, there are some, downsides to the profession that we have to navigate, but it's a great time to be an optometrist. And there's so many opportunities with it. There's so many modes of practice that you can practice in. So you really have to focus on the, you know, what the good and what the opportunities are, and sort of kind of block out the noise and learn how to navigate the challenging parts. So that's what my advice would be to all the optometrists that are listening to this podcast.
Well, and you've done such an excellent job doing so. And so, for anybody who would like to connect with you further, what's the preferred way for them to reach out to you?
So probably the best way is LinkedIn. I'll, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. My email is Dr. Lichtig at lichtigfamilyeyecare.com. So I love talking to optometrists. I love talking to students, you know, sharing my perspectives and ideas. Um, Anything I can do to help minds grow themselves, I'm always up for the conversation. So that's how you'd be able to contact me best.
Well, hey, Ben, I appreciate you being on today. All the information you shared just about your journey, but just to be a beacon of hope and inspiration for others in our profession is something I really appreciate about you. And so that's really it for today. For anybody who's listening, make sure that you share the podcast, provide a like or a comment, and stay tuned for my next podcast where we can reflect and grow stronger together.